The words hit me like a slap across the face. Lesbianism is the greatest disgrace a family can ever bring upon itself, my mother, Eleanor, proclaimed from the front of the church hall during the annual potluck, her voice echoing with the conviction of someone who had never doubted her faith for a second. I sat frozen in my folding chair, the potato salad on my plate suddenly tasting like ash, as the congregation nodded in agreement around me. How could she say that so publicly, so confidently, when the woman she trusted more than anyone in the world, her best friend Samantha, was hiding the exact same truth that I had been burying deep inside myself for years? I excused myself quietly, slipping out the side door into the humid Ohio afternoon, my heart pounding as the weight of her words pressed down on me. At 28, I had built a life as a high school English teacher in our small town of Maplewood, Ohio, a place where Sunday services and family dinners were the glue holding everything together. My mother had raised me alone after Dad left when I was 10, pouring all her energy into the church and making sure I followed the straight and narrow path she believed was the only one to salvation. But lately that path felt like a cage, especially since the day Samantha Reed walked into my life 3 years ago at a church book drive. Samantha was 42, elegant with her short dark hair and kind eyes that seemed to see right through people. She owned the only independent bookstore in town, and Mom adored her, called her the sister she never had, the one who helped with everything from Bible study groups to charity events. Samantha was the one Mom turned to for advice on everything, the trusted confidant who never let her down. But for me, Samantha had become something else entirely. It started with late-night talks about literature at the store after closing, discussions that veered from Shakespeare to the complexities of love, in a world that demanded conformity. I found myself looking forward to those moments more than anything, my pulse quickening whenever she smiled at me. At first, I told myself it was just admiration, a mentor thing. But deep down I knew it was more. And now, with Mom's words ringing in my ears, I couldn't deny it anymore. I drove home in a daze, the old farmhouse on the edge of town feeling emptier than ever. The walls were covered with family photos and Bible verses framed in gold, reminders of the values Mom had instilled. Honor thy mother and father, one read. But what about honoring yourself? The question gnawed at me as I paced the living room, replaying every interaction with Samantha. Had she noticed the way I lingered? Did she feel the same pull? Or was I imagining it all, damning my soul just like Mom warned? The internal battle raged, the religion that had been my foundation versus the truth screaming to be acknowledged. By evening I knew I had to talk to someone, and the only person I could trust was Samantha. The next morning I found myself at Reed's Books, the bell jingling as I pushed open the door. Samantha looked up from behind the counter, her smile warm and inviting as always. "Skylar, what a nice surprise. Coffee?" she asked, already pouring a cup. I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I took it. We sat in the back corner, surrounded by shelves of novels that explored every human emotion imaginable. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said gently, her eyes searching mine. I took a deep breath. "Mom said something at the potluck yesterday about lesbianism being a family disgrace." It hit me hard. Samantha's expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker in her eyes. "Your mother has strong beliefs, Skylar. We've talked about it before." I leaned forward. "But what if it's not that simple? What if someone you love is struggling with it?" The words hung between us, heavy with implication. Samantha reached out and squeezed my hand briefly. "Then that someone needs to know they're not alone. Faith isn't about perfection. It's about grace." Her touch sent a spark through me, and for the first time, I wondered if she understood more than she let on. The conversation flowed for hours, touching on scripture interpretations I'd never heard in church. How love was the greatest commandment, how judgment belonged to God alone. By the time I left, my mind was a whirlwind, but the burden felt a little lighter. Little did I know this was just the beginning of the storm. That night, alone in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the ceiling and replayed Mom's speech word for word. She had quoted Leviticus, her voice steady and certain, while I sat there wondering if the God she worshipped could really hate the feelings that made me feel alive for the first time. I thought about the girls in high school who had dated boys because that was what everyone expected. I had done the same, a few awkward relationships that never felt right. Then Samantha came along, and suddenly the world had color. But color came at a price. If Mom ever found out, she would see it as betrayal. The woman she trusted most in the world would be the one who helped me see the truth. I fell asleep with tears on my pillow, caught between the daughter Mom raised and the woman I was becoming. The week after the potluck, I avoided Mom as much as possible, claiming extra grading and parent-teacher conferences. She noticed, of course. "You seem distant, Skylar," she said one evening over meatloaf, her fork pausing mid-air. "Is everything all right at school?" I forced a smile and nodded, but inside I was screaming. How could I tell her that her words had cracked open something I couldn't close again? Instead, I found myself at the bookstore every afternoon, drawn there like a compass needle. Samantha never pushed. She simply listened, recommending books I hadn't read. Titles by authors who wrote about women loving women in subtle, beautiful ways. We discussed them over tea, our conversations stretching longer each day. One Thursday, as rain pattered against the windows, I finally asked the question that had been burning inside me. "Have you ever wondered if the Bible is being misinterpreted about this?" Samantha set her mug down slowly. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I've wondered a lot of things over the years, Skylar. Sometimes the hardest part of faith is questioning what we were taught." She didn't elaborate, but the way her eyes met mine told me she wasn't just speaking theoretically. That conversation lingered with me for days. I started researching on my own late at night, reading articles about progressive Christianity and stories of people who had reconciled their orientation with their beliefs. None of it erased the guilt, but it gave me language for what I was feeling. Meanwhile, Mom kept inviting Samantha over for dinner, praising her for being such a good influence. I sat across the table from both of them, watching Mom laugh at Samantha's jokes, completely unaware that the woman she called her rock was becoming my safe harbor. One evening after one of those dinners, Samantha walked me to my car. The air was cool, fireflies blinking in the grass. "You don't have to carry this alone," she said softly. I wanted to tell her everything then. How her voice calmed the storm in my head. How her presence made the world feel less impossible. Instead, I hugged her goodbye, holding on a second longer than I should have. When I pulled away, her eyes held something new, something tender and uncertain. Neither of us spoke of it, but the moment changed everything. Back home, Mom was waiting up. "Samantha is such a blessing," she said, sipping her herbal tea. "I don't know what I'd do without her." I nodded, the irony twisting like a knife. The woman Mom trusted most was the one I was falling for. The conflict tore at me. Loyalty to my mother versus the truth of my heart. I lay awake wondering how long I could keep pretending. The next Sunday, Mom asked me to help with the youth group. I agreed, hoping it would distract me. But during the lesson on purity and God's design for marriage, I felt like a fraud. Afterward, a teenage girl pulled me aside, eyes wide with worry. "Miss Thompson, what if someone feels different?" Her question mirrored my own. I gave her the church-approved answer, but inside I hated myself for it. That night I called Samantha. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," I whispered. She was silent for a long moment. "Then maybe it's time we talked about what's really going on, for both of us." Samantha's apartment above the bookstore was small but warm, filled with plants and books stacked everywhere. I arrived after closing, nerves buzzing. She poured 2 glasses of iced tea and sat across from me on the worn couch. "I've been carrying something for a long time, Skylar," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I've never told your mother." She told me then, about the marriage she had entered young because it was expected, about the quiet realization in her 30s that she had been living a lie, about the woman she had loved briefly before choosing duty over desire. "I chose the path of least resistance," she said, eyes glistening. "But I never stopped wondering what life could have been." Her confession unlocked something in me. For the first time, I admitted out loud that I was in love with her. The words hung in the air, terrifying and freeing. Samantha didn't pull away. Instead, she took my hand and said, "I feel it too. But this is complicated. Your mother is my dearest friend. If we pursue this, we risk hurting her deeply." We talked until dawn, weighing scripture against the reality of our feelings, debating whether love could ever be wrong if it brought no harm to others. No easy answers emerged. We agreed to move slowly, to keep it private while we figured out what honesty would cost. The following months were a delicate dance. We stole moments, coffee dates framed as book discussions, late-night phone calls that felt like home. I started attending a different church service across town, telling Mom it was for professional development. She approved, proud of my spiritual growth. Samantha continued her role as Mom's confidant, helping plan the annual revival. The double life weighed on both of us. I saw the guilt in Samantha's eyes every time Mom hugged her. I felt it in my own chest when I sat through family dinners, listening to Mom quote passages that condemned what I now embraced. One crisp autumn evening, Samantha and I drove to a secluded park outside town. We walked hand in hand under golden leaves, the first time we had risked any public affection. "I don't want to hide forever," I said. She stopped and turned to me, her expression pained. "Neither do I. But Eleanor has been through so much. Losing your father, building the church from nothing. If she loses us both," her voice trailed off. We sat on a bench, shoulders touching, and for a moment the world felt right. Yet the shadow of consequences loomed. That night, back in my empty house, I journaled the first honest prayer I had written in years. "God, if you made me this way, help me find a path that doesn't destroy the people I love." The tension built slowly. Mom began noticing my absences. "You and Samantha seem close lately," she remarked one Sunday. I brushed it off, but inside panic rose. Samantha and I argued for the first time, not in anger but in fear. "Maybe we should stop," she suggested. "Maybe we can't," I countered. The debate lasted hours, each of us presenting reasons rooted in faith, family, and personal truth. No one was completely right. No one was completely wrong. We ended the night in a tentative embrace, agreeing to keep going but with eyes wide open. The storm was gathering, and none of us would escape unscathed. Winter arrived with its usual bite, and with it came the church's Christmas pageant. Mom asked Samantha to direct it, and me to help with the youth choir. Working together under Mom's watchful eye was torture. Every glance between Samantha and me felt loaded. One rehearsal, while Mom was distracted with the lighting crew, Samantha brushed my hand while handing me sheet music. The spark was undeniable. Later, in the quiet of the bookstore, we finally kissed, soft, tentative, full of years of unspoken longing. It was the most honest moment of my life. Yet the guilt followed immediately. "This is beautiful," Samantha whispered. "But it's also dangerous." We tried to set boundaries. We prayed together, read books on reconciliation of faith and identity, and argued late into the night about what Scripture truly required. Samantha believed God's love was bigger than any label. I struggled with the verses Mom had drilled into me since childhood. Our debates were never about winning. They were about survival. "If I come out, I lose my mother," I said one night. "If I stay silent, I lose myself," she replied. Neither statement was false. Spring brought new pressure. Mom announced she was nominating Samantha for Woman of the Year at the church awards. The irony stung. I watched Samantha accept the plaque with a gracious smile while I sat in the audience, knowing the secret that would shatter the honor. Afterward, at the reception, Mom pulled me aside. "I worry about you, Skylar. You seem distant. Is there someone?" Her question was innocent, but it landed like a grenade. I lied, saying I was focused on work. That night, Samantha and I met at the park again. "We can't keep doing this to her," she said, tears in her eyes. "But I can't lose you either," I answered. The conversation circled for hours, tradition versus authenticity, duty versus desire. We left unresolved, both hearts heavier. Summer heat intensified everything. I started volunteering at a youth center in the next town, working with LGBTQ teens who had been rejected by their families. Their stories mirrored mine and Samantha's, strengthening my resolve. Yet every time I drove back to Maplewood, the weight of Mom's expectations crushed me. Samantha, meanwhile, began questioning her own silence. "I've hidden for 20 years, she confessed. "Maybe it's time to stop." We made no decisions, but the conversations grew more urgent. Each choice felt like choosing between two versions of love, one for family, one for self. Neither path was without victims. One humid July evening, Mom invited us both for dinner. The three of us sat on the porch, fireflies dancing. For a moment it felt perfect. Then Mom said, "Samantha, you've been like a daughter to me. I don't know what I'd do if I lost you." Samantha's hand tightened around her glass. I looked away, the words slicing deep. Later, alone with Samantha, we held each other and cried. The happiness we had found was real, but so was the impending loss. We both knew the day of reckoning was coming, and when it arrived, none of us would walk away unchanged. The confrontation began innocently enough. Mom found a handwritten note from Samantha in my car. Nothing explicit, just thinking of you, S. She waited until Sunday dinner to ask about it. Are you and Samantha spending a lot of time together? Her tone was curious, not accusatory. I froze. Samantha, sitting across the table, kept her expression neutral. We're friends, Eleanor, she said calmly. Mom nodded, but I saw the doubt flicker. The seed was planted. The next week, Mom started asking questions. About my late nights, my new church, my sudden interest in alternative theology. I deflected, but the pressure mounted. Samantha and I argued more frequently now, not out of anger but exhaustion. We have to tell her, I insisted one evening in the bookstore. Not yet, she pleaded. She's already lost so much. Our debate stretched into the night, each of us presenting the other's perspective with painful accuracy. Mom's faith had sustained her through hardship. My truth was the only way I could breathe. Samantha's loyalty was genuine. My love for her was equally real. No side held all the moral high ground. Then the inevitable happened. Mom walked into the bookstore unannounced and saw us embracing behind the counter. The silence that followed was deafening. What is this? She whispered. Samantha stepped forward. Eleanor, we need to talk. The conversation that ensued was raw and devastating. Mom quoted scripture, her voice breaking. I countered with stories of pain caused by forced silence. Samantha shared her own hidden years, tears streaming. No one shouted. No one was entirely wrong. Mom felt betrayed by the two people she loved most. I felt torn between the woman who raised me and the woman who completed me. Samantha carried the guilt of deceiving her dearest friend. Mom left without slamming the door. Somehow that was worse. For days she refused my calls. Samantha and I sat in her apartment, processing the wreckage. This is what I was afraid of, Samantha said quietly. We caused pain trying to be honest. Yet neither of us regretted the love. We spent hours discussing responsibility, how our choices, though necessary, had consequences we had to own. The internal conflict peaked. I questioned if my happiness justified my mother's heartbreak. Samantha questioned if her silence had been cowardice or compassion. The answers never came easy. Mom eventually agreed to meet at the farmhouse. The three of us sat in the living room surrounded by Bible verses and family photos. She spoke first. I raised you in truth, Skylar. This feels like rejection of everything I taught. I answered, I still love God, Mom. I just love Samantha too. Samantha added, I never meant to hurt you, Eleanor. You've been my family. The discussion lasted until midnight. Scripture, personal pain, societal expectations. Every viewpoint had merit. Every decision carried loss. When Mom finally stood, she said, I need time. I love you both, but I don't know how to reconcile this. She left quietly, and the house felt emptier than ever. The months that followed were a slow unraveling and rebuilding at once. Mom attended church less frequently, citing health, though we all knew the truth. I moved in with Samantha above the bookstore. A small act of courage that cost me Sunday dinners and family holidays. The town whispered. Some friends distanced themselves. Others surprised us with quiet support. Through it all, Samantha and I held each other accountable. We attended counseling together, continued our faith discussions, and learned to live with the grief of what we had broken. One crisp autumn afternoon, almost a year after the potluck that started everything, Mom showed up at the bookstore. She looked smaller, somehow older. I've been praying, she said simply. I still don't understand, but I miss my daughter. And I miss my friend. We talked for hours on the same couch where Samantha had first confessed. Mom didn't endorse our relationship, but she didn't condemn it either. She admitted her own rigidity had caused pain. I admitted my secrecy had wounded her trust. Samantha accepted her part in the deception. No one claimed victory. We simply agreed to try. Awkward visits, careful conversations, small steps toward something new. Samantha and I still walk in the park where we first held hands openly. The happiness we share is deeper now, tempered by the knowledge of its cost. I teach at a new school, one more accepting. Samantha expanded the bookstore to include diverse voices. Mom still preaches on Sundays, but her sermons now include more grace and less judgment. The family is fractured, yet we are all taking responsibility for the pieces we broke and the pieces we are rebuilding. As I sit here tonight, Samantha's head on my shoulder, watching the fireflies dance beyond the window, I find myself reflecting on the journey. The decisions that seemed right caused the deepest wounds. The path of honesty demanded the greatest sacrifice. Yet in accepting the loss, we each found a measure of peace. Looking at the woman I love, I realized the awakening didn't come from winning the argument. It came from learning to live with the consequences. True or false? Is embracing your true self always worth the pain it causes the family that raised you?